Hello, welcome to Legal Action. My name is David Siegel. Today we're going to be talking about consumer protection laws, specifically the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, as well as the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and we're going to try and dovetail identity theft in there as well because it relates to both of these acts. I want to welcome my co-host Jesse Barrientos. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave.
And Jesse, we're going to talk about consumer protection. These are federal laws that were put in to protect consumers, whether it be regarding their credit reports or regarding debt collection. So let's start with the Fair Credit Reporting Act. What is this all about?
Well, I think the folks at home need to know, too, that what happens every time there's a transaction, that the credit reporting agencies have that information so that they can keep essentially a dossier on you of whether or not you pay your bills on time, how much you pay, if you're late or anything like that.
Right. And there's three big ones: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian.
Yep.
And everybody, you're right, is concerned about their credit score because it's affecting what it costs to obtain credit, and even it's affecting their auto insurance. The lower their score, the higher they're paying for auto insurance nowadays. So the credit report and the credit score is extremely important, and this act, the Federal Fair Credit Reporting Act, ensures that the information on there is either one, accurate, or two, there's measures to improve it if there's falsehoods or inaccuracies on that.
Right. There's a couple. Well, we'll go through as many as we can. One of the things that folks should know is that you're entitled to know the information if there's a negative, remark against you with respect to your credit. So if say, for example, you're trying to get a mortgage and or car loan or anything like that, and we deny you, then you're entitled to know
why you were denied.
The reason.
Okay. You also have the right to ask for your credit score. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In addition to that, you have the right to complete and accurate information. So if there's something missing, let's say there's a debt on there that you paid off and you've already satisfied it.
Right.
Or let's say there's a debt on there that you don't owe at all. It's just a phantom debt because there is a lot of misinformation on the credit reports. You have the ability to have that corrected under this Fair Credit Reporting Act, but you need to do that in writing, correct?
You need to do that in writing. I mean, essentially, you have a right to know exactly what's in your file, all the time. And, of course, the only way you can do that, Dave, is how?
Well, you send a dispute letter that you do not agree with the information that's contained in the report, specifically what that item might be. And from there, the credit bureau has to contact the person who put the information to them. They have 30 days to verify that information is accurate. If they do not receive verification back within those 30 days, the item is removed. So even if it's true, if they don't get the information back within 30 days, it can come off. But obviously you don't want to dispute anything that's true. You only want to dispute things that are inaccurate and false.
Right, and the only way to know what might be inaccurate or false is to look at your credit report.
Right, you have to pull your report. And you can do this for free once a year at annualcreditreport.com. And what I suggest is, since there's three different bureaus, that you pull one every 4 months. That way you always have an accurate look at what's currently happening with your credit file from either Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion. Do one every 4 months because that's the same as being able to pull one each year.
Right. And, the folks should also know that, for example, old information, too, is not allowed to stay on there. Old negative information, for example, if it's over 7 years old, or for bankruptcy, that's over 10 years. If
Right.
it still continues to show up on there, that needs to come off because that's what the act says.
Right. It's supposed to come off automatically after 10 years of bankruptcy. But of course, if you see that one has not come off, you need to dispute that in writing and get it off.
Right. Well, I mean, that's just for the bankruptcy. If, for example, let's say you had hard time 7 years ago or 6 years ago, and now the time is ticking, you're into your seventh year, that information should drop off. If it doesn't, you could certainly address it in writing.
Right. Another thing to note is when you apply for a job, a lot of employers want to pull your credit report because they somehow link your ability to do the job based on how you've handled debt and credit. And most employers need your consent in writing to pull your credit report. There's some exceptions for the trucking industry.
Sure.
I'm not 100% sure why, but they've got their own lobby and they got that taken care of. But generally, employers must get your written consent before they can pull your credit report. But you're going to give them the consent because you want the job.
Well, right. If you don't, if you don't want the job, then you don't sign the report. Just like your mortgage. If you don't sign the paperwork, you don't get the loan. But it's really important. For example, let's say if you're going to be in a position that requires you to handle money. Let's say maybe it's even a teller, maybe it's a loan officer, maybe it's some position like that. As an employer, I would be neglecting my duty if I didn't do my due diligence and at least check to see, hey, if everything is okay. Because if you can't take care of your business, there's going to be a problem with you taking care of mine.
That's true. We're just seeing more and more of this with employers. It used to be just if you're applying for financing, if you're applying for apartment, things like that. But now you're seeing it with employment too. Let's talk about seeking damages. If information is put on wrongfully and it doesn't come off, you can actually file a lawsuit and recover damages. Is that correct?
That's correct, but you also have to understand, too, in addition to the damages, I believe the Act gives you $1,000 and possibly attorney's fees. There are some other provisions for the size of the debt collection agency, the percentage of that. However, you also have to keep in mind, it's just like anything else, what those damages are.
That's right.
And for example, if it depends upon what you violated, if you violated the provision and you called me at a time when you weren't supposed to call me, I think we're going to be talking about those kind of things in a minute, or you didn't take the stuff off, how did it damage me? Did it damage me because I didn't get that $500,000 a year job that this other person was going to give me because they looked at the credit report? That may be.
Yeah, or you may have paid another point in interest on either a mortgage or a vehicle financing.
As a result of having that. But you have
Right.
to be able to prove that. And, of course, litigation is expensive.
That's true. Another important note for consumers is they can limit the pre-screened offers that the credit bureaus provide the information to. So if you're tired of receiving offers in the mail for pre-approved credit cards and things like that, you can somewhat limit these pre-screened offers by dialing 888-5-OPT-OUT. That's 888-5-OPT-OUT. And you can take your name off these pre-screened offers and actually have your mailbox filled with mail that you want, as opposed to all this ridiculous junk mail that people are receiving every day.
Well, that's important. Maybe we should deal with that if we get to that point in terms of our identity theft portion, because that's going to become really important. You don't want to have those things floating out there.
That's right. So just to reiterate, the Fair Credit Reporting Act is to ensure that there's accurate information on people's credit files with the three major bureaus. There's remedies to correct the information,
Right.
and you could even sue if those items are not removed properly. So you have a lot of protection because credit is so important in everybody's life, whether it be for financing or employment or even auto insurance.
For everything, and you really have to think about it. The integrity of the whole system is based upon the accuracy of the information. And if it's not accurate, you're not telling me something. People, they're not going to get a chance to sit down and talk to you about anything else. They're going to look at what's on your report.
That's right.
And if it's a negative mark, then all kinds of bad things can happen. So it's important to have the system that allows for those type of things, allows for amendments. Just for example, and I did one written request for some inaccurate information. I had a client who was divorced, and the husband had pieces of property that he had before the divorce, so they're non-marital. And what had happened is it was showing up that those were her former addresses, and it wasn't her former addresses. And so we wrote a letter and asked them to correct it, and we provided some additional information to show, I think probably a portion of the decree, to show that indeed not only were those not hers, but she had never lived at those places in the first place.
Right. Nowadays, the best way to dispute the information is actually online. If you go to the three bureaus online, there'll be a dispute section. So you no longer need to send a formal letter. You can initiate it online immediately, and that starts that 30-day process. So that's the best way to do it.
I like the old-fashioned way, Dave. Perhaps you do them both with a copy of it. I like paper.
Well, I agree, but you do have some proof when you're dealing with it online.
Sure.
One other thing I wanted to mention too regarding the Fair Credit Reporting Act is we both do a fair amount of bankruptcy law, and a lot of times clients still have negative information on their credit report after they've already filed bankruptcy and after they've eliminated or discharged those debts. And what I tell clients, and I'm sure you do as well, but it's important, don't assume that the information is going to come off the credit report automatically. You need to take a look at your credit report after you file the bankruptcy and attack those individual creditors who remain on. You have to dispute that because you want your report to heal itself as quickly as possible so that you can obtain credit in the future and get back on your feet again. But the information just doesn't come off necessarily by itself. You have to look at it and you have to attack it. And we see this day after day.
Yeah, you only know if you look. And, although, again, the bankruptcy is going to be on your report, no way to get that off, for the next 10 years.
That's right. Turning to the second issue, we're going to talk about the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which is a very important act which protects individuals from creditor harassment. And Jesse, the Fair Debt Collection...
Creditor harassment?
Creditor harassment.
Creditors harass people?
They do. But it only pertains to consumer debt if you are a debtor. So it doesn't deal with commercial accounts. So if you were a plumbing company and you were being harassed, you're not a consumer under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. But you do have several rights and remedies to make sure that you are not being harassed. So let's start by first talking about what types of debts are covered under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act.
Well, the same kind of debts that you would have, and we're talking about being a consumer, not commercial. So that would be your credit cards, that would be things associated with pretty much anything else, your insurance, your household debts, anything like that. It could even be associated with your utilities. Sometimes people get behind on those kind of things, and they do have aggressive collection. Sometimes they're in-house, sometimes they're out-house, to collect those type of debts. So pretty much think of whatever it is as a consumer, what other things could come after you, be it the credit cards, be it the utilities, be it anything else, really.
Right. Now, if you receive a call from one of the debt collectors or if you receive a letter in the mail, you're going to see some correspondence under there that says...
Well, first, who is a debt collector, Dave?
Well, that's what I'm leading to.
Okay.
You're going to get the correspondence that says, we are a debt collector. Any information obtained can be used for that purpose. So they're acknowledging that they're a debt collector because they're someone who regularly collects on debts. And that can include an attorney who regularly collects for a particular vendor or provider.
But you have to regularly collect in order to meet that criteria.
That's correct. But I would be very careful. As an attorney, if I was even collecting on one account one time, I would put that caveat language in there just to play it safe.
And we do. The only thing you don't have to worry about that is if you're collecting for yourself. If somebody owes you as an attorney, you don't have to put that. It's just if you're collecting for someone else.
So we've got the debt collector. Now there's certain reasonable efforts, reasonable times when a debt collector can contact you as an individual. Would 11:30 at night when you're sleeping, would that be a fair time to contact you?
That's fine for me because I'm not going to answer the phone. I'll be sleeping.
In general, though, is that outrageous?
That is unacceptable. 11:30. Nobody, generally is going to be up. And what happens if you have kids? You're going to disturb their sleep and that kind of thing as well.
Sure.
So there's a time frame. I believe it's from 8 in the morning, which I still think is too early anyway, to I believe it's 9 o'clock at night, which also may be on the other side of that. I mean, is it outrageous? No, but 8 o'clock. I may not be up at 8. I might.
Well, the government is telling you to get up, Jesse.
Yes, that's true. I say I may not be up, Dave, or I may not want other people to know that I'm already up.
I'll take you all the way back to Ben Franklin, okay?
Very good.
Getting up early, right? Mm-hmm. Early bird gets the worm.
That's true, every time.
So let's also talk about what they can't do if you let them know that you don't want to be contacted, either at your job or if you notify them in writing that you do not wish to be contacted whatsoever. Will that work in terms of stopping the collection efforts?
Well, you're still gonna, if you truly owe the money, they could still sue you. Anybody could sue you in small claims court or any other, depending upon the amount they're after you. But if you generally write that letter, then
that you don't want to be contacted.
That you don't want to be contacted. Then they can't contact you for anything except they can contact, which is really funny. They can contact you to tell you that they're not going to contact you. I always thought that was anymore, exactly.
And then of course they can contact you with a big summons and a lawsuit. But
that's the exception. Sure.
But what's important is you don't want to contact them and just say I dispute the debt necessarily to get the collections to stop. You want to actually say in the letter that you do not wish to be contacted in any way, shape, or form regarding this debt.
Right. You want to be very careful about what you say. In fact, I suggest that you go out there and you talk to an attorney who is familiar with the Fair Debt Collection Act.
Right. Now, this is one I see a lot that's kind of troubling. This is where a debt collector contacts either a family member or a friend or even a neighbor, and they kind of give up a little bit of information that they're collecting on a debt even though they're not supposed to, what are some of the laws regarding contacting a neighbor, friend, or relative? Can they go into the debt?
Well, no, they can contact other people for purposes. Now remember, they're trying to collect on a debt. It's legitimate for them to be able to do that within the rules that have been set up. So in order for me to be able to find out maybe where you live or where you work or what your phone number is, I can I can contact those people, but generally it's just limited to a one-time kind of thing. I can't really tell you, hey, listen, I'm looking for Mark's friend Dan because he owes me a ton of money, or he owes the credit card a ton of money.
Right. Well, I know for a fact this one gets abused a lot, because when someone calls a neighbor and says, we're from ABC Collection Company, by the way, does Mrs. Smith still live next door to you? It's pretty much a dead giveaway that they're collecting on a debt.
Sure.
So,
no way around that one.
Let's talk about what the debt collector must tell you, and specifically in that very first contact or letter that they send to you, you're entitled to some information as a consumer or as a debtor. What do they have to tell you?
They got to tell you who the account is, for whom they're collecting. They got to tell you the amount, and they've got to tell you, if you don't contact them within 30 days, that they're going to then therefore assume that the debt is legitimate. There's something else you have to be aware of too, because if you just ignore it, and that may be the best thing, it establishes what they call a statement of account.
Okay. I'm going to get a little technical here, but there's a case called Swanson, which basically says on that first notice, which is called a dunning letter, the very first notice, they have to provide that language that you stated, that if you let us know within 30 days that you do not believe you owe this money, you need to contact us. What they can't do is they can't demand payment immediately. They can't do anything that contradicts that 30-day grace period. So basically that first letter is almost like a just get me in the door kind of letter. They wait out the 30-day period, and if they don't hear from you, then they can start making demands. But a lot of collection agencies blow this law, and they give the 30-day language, and they also say send payment immediately. They contradict the two. And this is something that an individual debtor can actually bring a lawsuit based on the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and succeed. In the case of Swanson, that's the controlling case that says 30-day notice. Let's talk about the lawsuit that a debtor can bring against a debt collector.
Well, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. There's a couple that you can bring as a debtor, right?
Yes.
So, and I believe in most places, sometimes the Attorney General will even if it's that egregious, because generally, if they're not dealing within the parameters of the law with you, chances are they're not dealing within the parameter of the law of several other people as well, and that might lead into what you call a class action.
Right. Let's talk about what they can't do. They cannot harass. They cannot make threats that they can't, or threats that they're going to do something to you. They can't force you to pay by any kind of extortion measures or anything like that. What can they legally do if you don't pay?
Well, I'll tell you, but before we talk about that, let's talk about what something else they can't do. If you send them a letter back that says you don't owe the money, okay,
all right,
then they can't do anything unless, and again, obviously you're not going to not tell the truth. You're not going to lie, but that may happen. And sometimes, again, when we talk about other issues here in terms of identity theft and all that, that might come true, and you really don't owe the money, then they really can't do that. I mean,
right,
they'll send some verification.
Well, they can respond back with
right,
some kind of proof, some kind of itemization, some kind of statement.
Sure.
If in fact you do owe it, then we have a dispute there.
They can't harass you. But the definition of harassment is really broad. What would you think harassment would include?
Non-stop calls, threats of arrest, threats of monetary damages if you don't pay, calling your job, talking to your boss, even though you've already advised them that your boss does not allow these type of, or your employment does not provide for these type of calls.
How about obscene and profane language?
Oh, absolutely. Harassment, sure. Swearing, threats, false information.
How about yelling at you?
Well, you shouldn't be yelled at either, right?
Really? Yeah. So
these collectors are aggressive, though.
They sure are.
Because they know very few people are going to actually bring a suit under this act. Some do, and there's some attorneys that specialize in it, but the overwhelming majority of people are going to just take it, or they're going to hang up on the debt collector, but they're not actually going to sue under the act. So the collectors are quite aggressive, knowing that they're not likely to be sued.
Right. And they also very often, give you false statements.
Yes.
Misrepresent themselves as being an attorney sometimes, because there's just an aura of an atmosphere of respect that people have, or maybe it's a lack of respect, if it's an attorney rather than just another individual, because they think, okay, it somehow makes it more legitimate, somehow makes it more legal. So, I can't misrepresent to somebody, or the debt collector can't, that, hey, listen, I'm attorney so-and-so. But I think, though, sometimes, and I've come across that, where, they represent themselves as, hey, working for this particular law firm.
Now let's dovetail, Jesse, into identity theft, because it's quite possible that information on your credit report has to do with misinformation due to someone stealing your identity, and a debt collector is calling you on a debt that you didn't incur because somebody stole your identity.
Right.
So here, your credit report is messed up, you're getting harassing calls at home and at work by humans, by computers, you're getting letters in the mail.
By computer, and that's the key to know too. If you answer the phone and there's a delay, it's either a debt collector or it's some type of automated message.
Right. Well, the best practice is if you don't see the number come up and the name come up as someone you recognize.
If you have caller ID.
Well, it's something you need if you're a debtor and you owe money. That's the first thing you should upgrade to.
Well, hopefully the phone company isn't one of the collectors.
That's true. So anyway, this identity theft is causing a ton of problem with your credit report, with the collection and the harassment. What are some of the things that a consumer should do to protect themselves so that their identity is not stolen?
Well, you have to kind of learn a little bit to think like a criminal. What would you do? How would I get information? How would I get information from anybody? Okay, well, hey, people throw away trash. They throw away garbage. Those things that we were talking about earlier about stopping the pre-approved credit card offers coming, and I said we would talk about that later. When you have those in the mail, they're sometimes people will just toss them out in the garbage, and people will look through your garbage.
Sometimes there's a check
and they'll grab
in there
that
that's linked to a credit card, a blank check that you can use as an advance or a purchase.
Right, on your own credit card. I'll even tell you a story. This was a long time ago. I forget which card it was. It might have been Discover or something like that. But I had moved, and I was an attorney back then, and some such of those checks.
Back then as opposed to now?
Back then as opposed to now. I'm still an attorney, but I was an attorney back then as well. And they went to the old address, and the person changed the address with the credit card company. They cashed one of those checks and put on their settlement for whatever lawsuit that they made up. Mm-hmm. They even made minimal payments. They were getting ready to leave the state, and for some reason or another, the U.S. Postal Inspector was onto them and caught them. And so that's how I found out how they did all those different kind of things. And so that was just by the credit card company sending it. Now, when we moved, we did the change of address and everything else. But, some of those things still got through. That's why, you want to tell them, too, hey, don't send me any things. You want to tell your credit card company. Unless that's something you want. You can certainly call up, and they will absolutely send it to you. They'll send you as many as you want. But, tell them, hey, don't send me any, and they should be able to make that happen. So one type is kind of dumpster diving. Another way is skimming.
What is skimming?
Well, do you know everybody uses their credit card? I still think cash is king. But everybody uses their credit card or their debit card or something like that for gas or at the ATM or any other place. And sometimes when it's not connected to the bank, or even sometimes when it is, a lot of times you have to watch out for the gas station, because it's stored and then it's transmitted sometimes at a later time with information. Well, they put these little scanners in there that simultaneously give them the numbers as well and the code that you type in. Now, it's refreshing to see, because before, you should just have put your credit card in there for the gas pump and it would go right through. Now, at least they ask you, in most places, the machine does, to put in your zip code. Not a great measure of protection, but still a step in the right direction. So what it does is it captures those things. Something else you have to worry about, too, is sometimes even at restaurants or places that you go, You know, you
Sure,
give
they
your,
leave with your card.
they leave with your card. It's out of your presence. You don't know what's happening. You know, and I believe, you know, because crooks are very, very ingenious, and they can duplicate that information, that magnetic strip, and be able to use that at a later time as well.
What is phishing?
Phishing a lot of time is trying to get personal information, usually from the computer.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I have another example of that. It was you get rewards with certain, you know, different cards, and one of them was with Flight. It was, I think, Southwest or something like that. And I had received an email that looked legitimate from Southwest Airlines that said we need to do an update to click on this link and enter my information. Okay, well, I know better.
You're not falling for that.
I'm not falling for that. And so I kind of saved it, and I called Southwest and said, hey, you guys sent me an email. It looks kind of official, and you're asking me to give my information. I really don't give my information over that. You know, did you send me an email? And the person told me, we didn't send you any such email. And they told me to send it to whatever it was, their fraud department. And interestingly enough, I have some other friends who have the same type of rewards card. They received the same email as well. So I let them know. I called them right away and told them, hey, you know, don't click on that link. Don't provide any information. Not that they were going to, but just on the off chance that sometimes it's real easy. You don't even think about, oh, okay, well, heck, I don't want to have to deal with another thing. And you click on it, and you know, anytime a site is asking you to put in your personal information, they already have it. There's no update or renew. You call me, or you know, or better yet, if there's a question, hey, call them.
Right. Mortgage companies, finance
That's
companies, banks, credit card companies, they're not going to contact you via email and ask for the personal information that you give them over the phone. They're going to do that all via phone.
Right.
And they're going to make sure that you can verify with your mother's maiden name and your social security number and your address and even some additional information sometimes. Certain lenders are very careful
Sure.
about the information that they ask.
And you know, there's a couple more things too that they talk about. For example, I talked about that in my example, changing your address, which is what they did to me. Talk about, you know, just plain old-fashioned stealing. If somebody steals your wallet, you know, never carry around your Social Security card or anything like that. But it's important, while we have a little bit of time left, to talk about, you know, how to deter that. The best thing I think that anybody can do, and I want to recommend that to all you folks out there right now, is to invest in a shredder. Okay, you know, the best, not that they're going to go after the other one. Get the cross cut, get diamond cut, just do whatever, really. Because you know what? The chances are they're just going to move on down to the neighbor who doesn't have the shredder and get that information. That's one of the best things that you can do with your personal documents. You can burn it.
Have a conflagration.
I suppose.
But also protect your Social Security number, protect all your information, your address. Don't give out information to anybody, basically.
Right.
To prevent identity theft from happening.
You can even, well, part of the of deterring it is also detecting it, which is going to require you to look at your credit report. You know, you might want to put a fraud alert, you know, on your credit cards, which allows people to lock it up so that somebody can't go and try to open up a credit card in your name. They have to follow through other steps.
And of course, if you are a victim, you should contact the 3 bureaus and let them know that you've been a victim of identity theft, and they will flag your report so that lenders will be able to see that.
Immediately, and you're going to need to file a police report as well.
All right. Thank you, Jesse, very much for being here.
You bet.
We've covered the Fair Credit Reporting Act and the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act with information as well about identity theft. Hopefully you'll heed those warnings. We'll see you next time on Legal Action. Take care.